I remember standing in the back of that church, hands folded, tie a little too tight. People were smiling, whispering, reaching for their phones. Cameras were up. Music swelled. And there she was, my little girl, grown into a woman in white, walking down the aisle. But not toward me. Her arm was wrapped around another man's. A man who wasn't her father. A man I'd never seen change a diaper, stay up through a fever, or pace a courthouse lobby wondering if he'd get a weekend visit. She walked past me like I was part of the wallpaper. No eye contact. No smile. No hesitation. Like I had never been there at all. And then I heard it. Clear as day, from someone behind me. That's her stepdad. He raised her when her real dad walked out. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I just sat down. What were they going to believe? The man in the tux walking her down the aisle? Or the man in the back row, alone, in silence? But what they didn't know is this. I spent 11 years in courtrooms, fighting for weekends and birthdays. I paid for her braces, her prom dress, her college textbooks, even when she wouldn't speak to me. I never walked out. I was pushed out. Gently. Legally. Permanently. And when I finally heard her say it, "You were never there," it didn't feel like anger. It felt like erasure. That was the moment I realized. I raised a daughter who forgot the man who never forgot her. If you're a father who gave your all and still ended up a stranger in your child's story, you're not alone. Subscribe. We tell the stories men were never allowed to share, and we don't whisper them anymore. I didn't always know what I was doing as a father, but I knew what I wanted to do: stay. Stay when it was hard. Stay when I had nothing. Stay even when the system made me earn every second of fatherhood like it was a privilege, not a right. My name is Brian Keller. I was raised in a house where my father barely said 10 words a day, but his hands were callous from work and his shoes were always by the door. So I thought fatherhood meant this: provide. Protect. Never complain. When Julia, that's my daughter, was born, I remember holding her in that sterile hospital room, afraid to even breathe. She was so small. So pink. So perfect. Her mother had fallen asleep, and the nurses were busy. And there I was, a 26-year-old man with dirt under my nails and a mortgage I wasn't sure I could keep up with, whispering to a newborn that I'd never let anything touch her. I meant it. I worked doubles and overnights just to keep food on the table. There were weeks I only slept on lunch breaks and folded up jackets. But every Friday night I picked her up. We'd get pizza, pepperoni for me, cheese for her, and go home to build pillow forts and watch old cartoons. I still remember the way her voice used to squeal when she saw me. "Daddy's here!" That was everything. I missed job promotions because they fell on visitation weekends. I turned down vacations because they interfered with her school schedule. I skipped dating for years because I didn't want anyone in her life who wouldn't treat her like gold. Her birthdays? I made every single one. Even the ones I wasn't invited to. I dropped gifts off on the porch. Sometimes I watched from the car. Just to see her blow out her candles. No one knew that. No one wanted to know that. To them, I was just the every other weekend dad. The one her mother painted with broad, bitter strokes. He didn't fight hard enough. He only shows up when it's convenient. He's inconsistent. But they never saw the court orders. They never read the emails I sent begging for just a few more hours. They didn't hear me cry in the parking lot after being told, "She's not up for a visit today." Fatherhood isn't always loud. It's not Instagram pictures and handwritten cards. Sometimes fatherhood is sitting alone in a car outside a soccer game you weren't told about. Watching other dads high-five their kids while yours pretends you're not even there. But I never stopped trying. Because somewhere in me was this voice, the one that held her in that hospital room, reminding me. She'll remember. One day, she'll remember. So I kept showing up. I paid the bills. I sent the texts. I left voicemails that went unanswered. I bought birthday gifts that never got opened. I was never perfect. But I showed up. Even when I had nothing left to give, I gave it. And for a while, it felt like it was working. She lived with me. I made breakfast every morning, drove her to school, waited outside during practice. We had a rhythm, not perfect but ours. But love doesn't always break with a crash. Sometimes it unravels one quiet thread at a time. It started with the little things. I'd ask how her day was, she'd mumble. Fine. I'd offer to help with homework. Already did it. I'd knock on her door and hear music loud enough to drown me out. She was drifting, and I couldn't reach her. But it wasn't just teenage mood swings. I knew that because it only started after her mother came back into the picture. Danielle, my ex-wife, walked out when Julia was 9. She said she needed space, that she wasn't cut out for full-time parenting. Said she felt trapped in the house, that she missed her freedom. So I stepped in fully, school drop-offs, doctor visits, recitals, everything. I held it down while she disappeared for 2 years. And when she popped back in with new hair, a new boyfriend, and a new version of history, Julia welcomed her like she'd been there all along. She never apologized. Not to me. Not to Julia. She just slipped back in like nothing had happened. Sending gifts, tagging her in old photos, flooding her feed with captions like, "So proud of my baby girl." And Julia? She started calling her Mom, again like those empty birthdays had never happened. At first, I didn't want to speak ill of her mother. I didn't want to poison Julia's heart. So I kept my pain to myself and let her figure it out. But then the phone calls started getting longer. The conversations colder. Julia began parroting her mother's bitterness, saying things like, "You're too strict. Mom says you never supported her dreams. You just want to control everything." I felt like I was losing my own daughter, one sentence at a time. I'd come home from work and find her on the phone, whispering in the hallway. She stopped leaving notes on the fridge. Stopped texting me when she got to school. She even started locking her door, something she'd never done before. But the moment that broke me was simple. It was a Saturday morning. I made pancakes. Her favorite, with chocolate chips and cinnamon, just like I used to when she was little. I brought them to her room and knocked. No answer. I opened the door. She wasn't there. Her bed was made. Her closet was half empty. On her desk was a printed itinerary, a flight to Arizona. A visit to her mom. No note. No text. No goodbye. Just gone. I called. No answer. I texted. Left on read. 3 days later, she replied with, "Relax. I'm safe. I just needed a break." That word break did something to me. A break? From the man who packed her lunches for 12 years. From the man who wiped her tears at midnight when she thought no one would ever love her. From the man who fought tooth and nail for custody while her mother skipped hearings. I sat down at the edge of her empty bed and stared at the wall. That's when I realized, you don't have to die to be left behind. You just have to be forgotten. I was still her father. But I wasn't her safe place anymore. And the worst part? I couldn't even tell her how much it hurt, because I was afraid it would push her further away. So I stayed quiet, hoping she'd come back. Hoping she'd remember. But love doesn't always bring people back. Sometimes it just gives them the comfort to leave faster. She was 23 when she told me, "You were never really there." We were arguing, though to be honest, I wasn't even raising my voice. I had asked her why she never returned my calls anymore. Why she blocked my number last month. Why her fiancé called me Brian, not Dad, even though I paid the deposit on their venue just to be involved. And she looked at me, calm, sharp, and cold, and said it like she was reading off a script that had been waiting years to come out. "You weren't there when it mattered. You were just around." I said, "Julia, I fought your mother in court for 5 years just to get shared custody. She scoffed. Yeah, well, I don't remember any of that. All I remember is Mom crying and Rick stepping up. That name! Rick! Danielle married him when Julia was 17. Julia spent one summer with them after high school, then came back calling him Dad. It was subtle at first. Then open. Then permanent. She said it like the word belonged to him now. That conversation ended with her walking out of my house, leaving the front door open behind her. I stood in the hallway for a long time, like I was waiting for her to come back and say she didn't mean it. She didn't. 3 months later, she sent me a text. Weddings June 12th, Church of Grace. 2 p.m. That was it. No. Will you walk me down the aisle? No. Let's talk. Just a cold, clinical update, like I was a distant cousin she felt obligated to notify. Still, I went. Because I raised her. Because I remembered her first words, her first fever, her first birthday cake. Because I loved her, even when she made it hard to like her. I rented a suit. Ironed it myself that morning. Took deep breaths in the car before stepping inside that church. And then it happened. The music began. People stood. And there she was, Julia, in white. Looking beautiful. Radiant. Like a woman I barely recognized. But it wasn't me on her arm. It was Rick. The man who missed her childhood. The man who showed up late. But got the part one thought I'd earned with blood and sacrifice. She didn't glance at me once. I stood still. I didn't make a scene. I didn't speak. But someone behind me did. A woman, a guest I didn't recognize, leaned over to the person beside her and whispered, "That's her stepdad." He raised her when her real dad walked out. I didn't turn around. I didn't defend myself. Because when people believe a lie long enough, the truth just sounds like bitterness. And as I watched Rick give her away, the officiant smiled and said, "Who gives this woman to be married today?" Rick replied proudly, "Her mother and I do." Her mother and him. The woman who disappeared when Julia was 9. And the man who only stepped in when the hard part was already over. And me? I sat in the 4th row. Alone. Forgotten. Later at the reception, I waited for a chance to speak to her. Just for a moment. A picture. A hug. Anything. She walked past me twice and never made eye contact. When the father-daughter dance came, I felt my heart stop. I stood halfway up, just in case. But the DJ announced, "This one's for the bride and her dad, Rick." I sat back down. I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I left early, while they were cutting the cake. When I got home that night, I sat in the dark, suit still on, shoes still polished, and stared at the blank TV screen. I kept hearing her voice again. "You were never really there." And the woman behind me, whispering. Her real dad walked out. But I never walked out. I was pushed out. Legally. Repeatedly. Quietly. I was the man who paced courtroom lobbies praying a judge would see me as more than a checkbook. I was the man who sent birthday gifts that sat unopened. I was the man who watched her school plays from the very back row, because her mother forgot to save me a seat. I didn't expect a thank you, but I never thought I'd be erased. So when people ask me why I didn't walk her down the aisle, I just say, because I was never really there, right? That line stayed with me. I stopped talking about her after that. Not because I didn't love her, but because I didn't recognize the version of her I had to explain. People would ask, "How's Julia?" I'd smile politely and say, "She's doing her thing." That was easier than saying, "She calls another man dad now." I didn't hang pictures of the wedding. I didn't bring it up at work. And when Father's Day rolled around that year, I turned off my phone at 6 a.m. No call came anyway. I guess people think silence means peace. But silence is just where grief hides when it's tired of crying. I wasn't at war with her. I wasn't angry. I was just done bleeding in places no one could see. I still kept her room exactly the way it was when she lived here. The posters, the books, the crooked lamp she always forgot to turn off. Her perfume still lingered in the air, that sweet, soft vanilla that used to fill my car on the way to school. Sometimes I'd walk in there and sit for a few minutes, just to feel close to the version of her I used to know. The one who called me daddy with sleepy eyes and mismatched socks. The one who once held my pinky finger at the zoo and said, "Don't let go." I never did. But she did. People told me, "She'll come around." But I stopped waiting. Because you can't wait forever at a door that no longer has your name on it. I tried reaching out twice that year. Once for her birthday, no reply. Once when I heard she got a promotion, I sent flowers. She posted them with a caption that read, "Thanks Mom and Rick." I stopped trying after that. Because every attempt felt like asking for scraps in a home I helped build. And when people posted their proud dad moments, wedding photos, graduations, Father's Day brunches, I scrolled past quietly, nodding to myself. Not out of jealousy, but out of mourning. I never lost her to death. I lost her to memory. To narrative. To people who showed up late but rewrote the story like they'd been there all along. I still kept her childhood drawings in a shoebox. Still had the video of her first piano recital saved on 3 different devices. Still remembered the name of her 5th grade best friend and the smell of the chlorine from her swim lessons. But none of it mattered now. They moved on from me like I was an old coat they outgrew. And I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't care. But because speaking started to feel like begging. And begging started to feel like humiliation. So I said nothing. Just carried it. Like fathers do. But even the strongest backs have a breaking point. Mine came one evening in early December, cold, quiet, forgettable to anyone else but me. I had just gotten home from the hardware store. Bought new light bulbs. I still replaced things around the house she used to break and forget, like I was maintaining a museum no one visited anymore. I opened my email just to clear some work notices. There, at the top, was a name I hadn't seen in a while, Julia. My heart jumped. For a second, I felt 12 years old again, hoping for a letter from a girl I liked. But it wasn't a message. It was an automatic notification. Your number has been removed from the family group plan. This change was made by Julia. I stared at it. Not angry. Not even shocked. Just still. A few days later, my phone bill bounced back. Turns out she also removed the billing card I had been using, the one that paid for her line the last 5 years. No message. No thanks. No goodbye. That was the last thread. Not the wedding. Not the man who took my title. Not the moment she looked at me and saw someone else. It was the quiet, clean removal. Like I was just a service she canceled. I didn't try to reach her after that. Not to ask why. Not to say goodbye. Not to get closure. Because there was nothing left to close. I stood in the hallway that night, the same one I used to pace when she had asthma attacks and I was too scared to sleep. The same hallway where her backpack used to hang on the coat hook, where her muddy shoes used to pile up, where she once taped a card to the wall that said, #OneDad. And I whispered to myself, not in anger, but in finality. I was holding onto an empty frame, hoping the picture would come back. But the picture was gone. And all I had left was the man in the mirror, still standing, but no longer waiting. That was the turning point. I didn't post anything. I didn't make any dramatic declarations. I just started living like someone who had finally let go of the rope he'd been burning his hands on for years. Letting go doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop chasing the people who use your love as a weapon. So I got up the next day and went to the gym. First time in years. My knees ached, my back reminded me that I wasn't 20 anymore, but I walked out with something I hadn't felt in a long time, clarity. That same week, I bought a journal. I'd never been a feelings kind of guy. But writing? Writing helped. Every morning I wrote one truth. Just one. I was a good father. I showed up. Her rejection isn't proof of my failure. I can be whole without being needed. Those entries started saving me. I also called my old friend Mark, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. We used to fish together before life got in the way. We made plans for that weekend. And we did it. No kids. No past. Just two men on a lake, catching silence and peace. That same month, I booked a trip. Nothing extravagant. Just a weekend in Maine. I'd always wanted to see the lighthouses. I went alone. Walked the coast. Took pictures I didn't post. Ate seafood I couldn't pronounce. Laughed with strangers. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel empty. I felt free. Free from the loop. From the ache of, what if? From the fantasy of a reunion that would never come. I still kept her shoebox. Still had that crooked lamp in her room. But I stopped waiting for footsteps in the hallway. Stopped checking her social media. Stopped measuring my worth against her silence. I also started therapy, quietly, online, twice a month. I didn't tell anyone. Because this healing wasn't for performance. It was for survival. There, I said things I'd never dared say aloud. It hurts that I became disposable. It wasn't fair, and I didn't deserve it. I don't need to be her hero to be whole. I'm still Dad. Even if no one says it. And slowly, not all at once, but piece by piece, I came back. Not as the man I was before fatherhood. Not as the man she stopped seeing. But as a man who rebuilt himself without needing applause or permission. I wrote a letter to Julia once, never sent it. It sits in my drawer now. Folded neatly. Lined in ink and unspoken grace. In it I told her, "You don't owe me a phone call. You don't owe me forgiveness. But I hope one day, if you ever wonder who I was when you weren't looking, you'll know I was still loving you." Just quietly. I ended it with, "I'm still your father. But I'm no longer chasing children who can't see me." And that's the truth. I still love her. That never changed. But now, I love me too. And that changes everything. I used to think fatherhood meant giving until there was nothing left. That love was proven through sacrifice. That if I just endured enough, stayed silent enough, bled quietly enough, eventually it would matter. But what I know now is this. Being a father is not a guarantee that you'll be seen. It's not a contract that promises love in return. It's a calling, one that will stretch your soul and sometimes break it. And sometimes, your own child becomes the person who wounds you the deepest. Not because they mean to, but because they can. We spend years protecting them from pain, never realizing that one day, they might become its source. So to every father who's still standing in silence, still wondering what you did wrong, let me say this plainly: you are not a failure just because they forgot. You are not weak because you grieve. You are not worthless because they replaced you in their story. You're allowed to stop chasing. You're allowed to stop explaining. You're allowed to love from a distance, and still hold your head up high. If you showed up, if you fought, if you stayed even when it was hard, then you were a good father. And that truth doesn't expire just because they've rewritten the credits. There is no shame in letting go of someone who made a home inside your heart, only to lock the door behind them. My door is open, but I no longer sit by it. That's the line I live by now. Because if they come back, it'll be on their terms. But if they don't, I will not spend the rest of my life waiting to be chosen again. And if you're a father like me, one who gave everything, lost almost everything, and still wakes up every day with love in your heart that has nowhere to land, I see you. You're not invisible. You're not a ghost in your own story. You're not weak for feeling hollow sometimes. You're not crazy for replaying birthdays, old laughter, and the way they used to run to the door when they heard your keys. And no, you're not a bad father just because your child can't see you now. Maybe you weren't perfect. Maybe you messed up here and there. But you were present. You tried. You fought. And most importantly, you loved them with everything you had. That love didn't fail. It just didn't land where it was supposed to. So if today feels heavy, if you're sitting in a quiet house wondering if you ever mattered, let me remind you, you did. You still do. You are still a father, even in the silence. You are still worthy, even in the absence. And your story deserves to be heard, not just remembered in whispers, but spoken in full. And if this story felt like yours too, type "Still Dad" in the comments. Let the world know. We're still here. Still loving. Still standing. Even if no one's clapping.